Okay, we're trying something for the first time here. We're trying to go over original wording of the Constitution. Holy mackerel. This is how intellectual men wrote way back in 1787. And I say men because, sorry, they were 100% men who went to the Constitutional Convention. So here we go. Let's just look at the first word that we'll look at is defense. It's highlighted in green. Um, Actually, the original spelling is defense with a C instead of an S. So throughout this, you see weird spelling sometimes and also some strange capitals. Okay. This first part of the Constitution is called the preamble. And then right above the word our Article 1 shows some rules for how the Constitution is structured. So it's divided into specific parts called articles, and each article is divided into sections. And Article 1 is about the rules governing our National Congress. Okay. So everything in yellow has a good chance of being asked about on the Unit D quiz, either within the question or within an answer. And a lot of people, they come into our class and they don't know what legislative branch or legislation or legislator is. And legislate is a verb that means when a representative body passes laws. Okay, pretty simple. Let's go down to section 2. And in yellow, below the first dot, the House of Reps will be composed of representatives elected every 2 years by voters. Okay. Of each congressional district. So states are divided up into congressional districts. It's not just by county, it's by congressional districts. Um, let's look in the yellow under the second dot. Representatives must be at least 25 years old and they must have been a citizen for 7 years. So, way back in 1787, so many Americans were immigrants from Europe that they didn't want to cut out many awesome citizens who may have immigrated to America when they were 10 or 15 and now they're 35, 40, they're great citizens. Let's not cut them out of being able to be a political leader. With the third dot, we come to a really difficult but important word, apportioned. Apportioned. That's Apportioned. And that means to set up in equal amounts. So throughout the United States, all congressional districts have under 700,000 citizens, usually somewhere between 650 and 700,000. So a portion means about equal amounts of people for each congressional district. But we see in green, orange, and blue highlighting some not so good racism. Now, what those are all saying is we have to add the whole number of free persons in a state to see how many citizens they have. And most of the Native Americans back then uh, lived in reserved places where they did not have to pay any government taxes. So those Indians, those Native Americans, they could not vote. They were not taxed. They weren't counted as citizens. So if you had, a tribe of Native Americans that lived in your state, those Native Americans could not count as citizens. But it says 3/5 of all other persons. And that was white political leader's code word for and 3/5 of slaves. Okay? That was really strange. 3/5 of slaves. So for every 5 slaves in a southern state, that southern state got to count those 5 slaves as 3 white citizens. The more citizens, the more reps. The more reps in Congress, the more political power. And so it was kind of like that fake political power that the South always had, because humans who were not regarded as citizens still got more than half of that person was regarded as a citizen for purposes of representation. That is really a tough concept. Uh, in the blue, the actual enumeration. Okay, so this dot or this section here, it talks about, okay, each state has so many people in it. How do we find out how many people are actually in a state? How many citizens does a state have to then judge how many representatives need to serve in the House of Reps? Well, if you look at the word enumeration, kind of right there in the middle, you can see numere, like numeral. Okay. Numeral, which means number. So the actual enumeration means the official count of citizens. And in our modern society, that's called a census. And so government workers go out and they try to make sure that they count to every citizen within, a district or within a state. And then they add up all those numbers and they see how many citizens there are in each state. Okay. All right. Um, and then, so the word census is in the green highlight there, but that word does not come up within the Constitution itself. It's just the situation is described. Now, the 2 sentences right above the green word census, it says the number of reps shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. Okay. So for each 30,000 citizens, a state would get 1 rep in the House of Reps. Okay. So if you had over 300,000, like 305,000, well, that's 10 times 30. That's that state, which would be big back then, had 300,000 people. But then a state that had maybe just 34,000, it would only get 1 rep in the House of Reps. Okay. So let's go to the orange word, impeachment there. All right. Most Americans think that impeachment means throwing a president out of office. No, it does not. Impeachment means the House of Reps brings serious charges against a president, and then those charges are going to go to the Senate to have a trial. And it's the Senate that can kick a president out of office only if they find the president guilty of the impeachment offenses. So the House files the statement that says, we find the president committed these crimes, and now we're going to send this matter to the Senate to try in the Senate. And a president is only kicked out if they're found guilty by the Senate after the House has impeached him. Section 3. The Senate will be composed of 2 senators from each state. Second bullet, no person shall be a senator who will not have attained the age of 30 years. This is just basic stuff, okay? But the third bullet is just a little bit strange, okay? So today we have 100 senators, 50 states times 2. Now, Sometimes there will be a tie vote when a law is considered. I should say when a proposed law is considered in the Senate. And if there is a tie, then the vice president can be the last vote to break the tie. Okay? Otherwise, you never see the vice president in with the Senate. The vice president really only shows up to break a tie. Okay? Let's go down to the bullet that is next to the blue highlighted word tried. And then this is about the Senate having the ability to kick a president out of office because the actual court case against the president, the Supreme Court Chief Justice is the presiding judge, and all members of the Senate are the jury. And if they have 2/3 of the senators vote to uh, kick the president out of office, he is relieved of his presidential duties. And no president has ever been kicked out of office. There have been 4 or 5 times where a president has been impeached, but the Senate has never convicted. Section 4, it just talks a little bit about elections, that states will take care of most elections, but if the National Congress wants to make rules, the National Congress can. Let's go to Section 6. Treasury of the United States. It was an actual building that held safely guarded gold, silver, and copper coins. There basically was no paper money back then. And somewhere in the Constitution, it says, hey, the only money was going to be coins. Uh, in orange, highlighting in the second bullet, bills. Bills is the word that means a proposed law. So you don't say Congress proposed a law. You say they proposed a bill. And a bill is a proposed law before it's passed by both the House and the Senate and signed into law by the president. So the president has to do the final step of signing the paper that has the law on it that's been passed by both the House and the Senate. And that signing puts the bill into effect as an official law. And usually laws during a certain year, they will become a new law January 1st of the next year, but there are some exceptions. The third bullet says before a law goes to the president, the House and the Senate have to pass the exact same words in that law. Okay. The fourth bullet talks about before the president can approve the law, those words have to be approved by both the Senate and the House. But then the bullet with the blue highlight in it says, hey, if the president disagrees with a bill that was passed by both the House and the Senate, he can veto the bill, and that vetoed bill is sent back to the House and Senate, and if they choose to, they can make some changes in it, and then they can, oh no, but right. They can either not make changes or make changes and then take a revote on it. And if the House and the Senate both vote 2/3 or more against the president's veto, that bill becomes official law. Okay. Sorry if I was a little clunky on explaining that. Now, that word for overturning a president's veto, it's not in the Constitution. It's in the green highlight, and that word is override. Another word with green highlight is in Section 8. The Congress shall have power to levy and collect taxes. Levy means you pass a law that will tax citizens. Okay? The The second bullet, any national tax laws passed by Congress must be the same in all states. Okay, we just take that for granted. But, in some countries, if you lived in the capital city and it had preferred status, maybe your business taxes might be lower there. So the United States did not want to be unfair in that way. So, Section 8, third bullet, the national government can borrow money and the Congress has to approve it. The fourth bullet, Congress could regulate commerce. Regulate means to pass laws that deals with commerce, which is business, trade, and banking. Okay? So Congress could pass commercial regulations with foreign countries or in relations between state to state. Okay? Uh, the next bullet, to establish an uniform rule of naturalization. Uniform rule means it has to be the same for each state, and naturalization means when you naturalize an immigrant, that immigrant becomes a U.S. citizen. So, naturalization is the process by which immigrants can become American citizens. And those laws Congress has to pass, and they have to be the same from state to state. The orange highlight says Congress can set up a system to coin money. And coin is a verb there. And that's where you have these huge buildings called mints, and they take melted down, let's say, silver, and it's poured into molds that when they cool, they make coins. And so back then, without paper money, the mint buildings had to turn out all the copper, silver, and gold money of the United States. Okay. The next yellow highlight, establish post offices. So states and localities are not involved in the U.S. Postal Service, only the national government. Now, our national copyright and patent laws, they are listed as the language that says to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writing and discoveries. Wow. So, official national copyright and patent status went way back to the original Constitution. Okay. Um, I scrolled. Next, where the orange inferior is, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is the top national court that settles all political problems and all law problems. So, a tribunal is a court, and inferior means below. So, what it means to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, it is other federal or national courts that are underneath the direction of the Supreme Court. And they hear lots of cases that come from the states that want to go to the Supreme Court, but they first have to go to a court below the Supreme Court, which is a federal appeals court. We'll learn more about that when we study the court system. The next bullet point, to define and punish piracies. Okay. And then to declare war, to raise and support armies, to provide and maintain a navy. Well, the first item there, to declare war, a president doesn't declare war. Congress has the authority to declare war. Now, to raise and support armies means to pay the soldiers and build the forts for them to stay in and pay for the training. To provide and maintain a navy, the same thing there. So it's Congress who lays out the money for our armies and navy, and it can declare war. But the actual commander in chief who gives directions and orders to the army's generals and the navy's admirals, that's the job of the president. Um, and let's go down to the next bullet there: to exercise exclusive legislation. And then if we go to the orange seat of the government of the United States. So that bullet is all about Congress authorizing to buy land to then build a brand new capital city. So Washington, D.C. did not exist in 1787. Uh, the U.S. Congress bought land between Virginia, well, really out of Maryland and a little bit out of Virginia. So Congress bought that land and then said, this is where we're going to build our national capital city. And they did not put it in a state. They carved out a separate district, which was called the District of Columbia. Okay. Now, the next bullet point says to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. What this means is Congress can make any laws on any topic if it is necessary for the welfare of the nation and its citizens. So while most of the powers of Congress in Article 1 are clearly stated, there are some powers that are not stated here, but if they are necessary and proper for the Congress to deal with, Congress can make laws about those issues. Wow. So if we look at the little blue words down below there, Congress can make laws on any topic if it is necessary for the welfare of the nation and its citizens. Section 9, that first bullet, man, more weird language. The migration or importation of such persons. Such persons was the racist way of saying African slaves that were captured in Africa and then transported to America as imports. Okay. And all that bullet means is the Constitution will not outlaw the importation of black slaves right away. And the importation of African slaves will have to end in 1808. So that still gave close to 30 years of the importation of African slaves. Okay. If we go down to the bullet point with the next yellow, no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. And the next bullet, and no person holding any office or profit or trust under them shall, with the consent of Congress, without the consent of Congress, accept any present or, now here's the key word, emolument. That means you can't make money from your office as president or Congress. You cannot make money by people giving you bribes or gifts. Okay. And all Section 10 does is says that states may not do those three things. Okay. All right. So I'm pretty sure that was a pretty good overview of Article 1 and the Congress.